In the world of espionage, the highest honor is to remain a ghost, a nameless shadow who shifts the course of history without anyone ever knowing you were there. The greatest failure is to be caught. This is not fiction. This is the story of a man who changed the outcome of World War II. A man who drank, brawled, and charmed his way into the highest echelons of enemy power. But what if a spy was so brilliant, so audacious, so devastatingly effective, that after he was caught, his enemies didn't just execute him? He was, by all accounts, a model German patriot. When World War I broke out, he enthusiastically enlisted in the German army. His sharp intellect, his war record, and his German background made him the perfect recruit for Soviet military intelligence. The GRU, the Soviet Union, was terrified of being caught in a two-front war, simultaneously fighting Nazi Germany in the West and Imperial Japan in the East. He quickly joined the Nazi Party and became a fixture at the German embassy. His personality was his greatest weapon. He was charismatic, intelligent, a heavy drinker, and a notorious womanizer. Stalin needed to know Japan's intentions. And so, Richard Sorge was sent to Tokyo. He was a natural actor, a man who could effortlessly adopt any persona the mission required. OTT trusted Sorge so completely that he gave him access to top-secret cables from Berlin. He was convinced that Great Britain was trying to trick him into a war with Germany. He dismissed Sorge's intelligence as disinformation. He refused to believe Hitler would betray their non-aggression pact. He had millions of fresh, battle-hardened troops, the Siberian divisions, stationed in the east. But he couldn't move them. He was terrified that Japan would take advantage of the situation and attack the Soviet Union from the east, forcing the two-front war he had always feared. Sorge would often help the ambassador write his reports back to Germany, all while gathering priceless intelligence for Moscow. It is no exaggeration to say that Richard Sorge's intelligence saved Moscow and, quite possibly, the entire Allied war effort. But Sorge's time was running out. The Japanese counterintelligence service, the Kempeitai, were masters of their craft. Stalin was caught completely by surprise, and the Red Army was shattered, suffering catastrophic losses. They had detected the faint radio signals from Sorge's ring and were hunting for the source. In October 1941, weeks after he had sent his fateful message about Japan's intentions, the ring was compromised. Sorge, Ozaki, and their collaborators were arrested. They saw him not just as an enemy, but as a master of their own craft, a senpai from whom they could learn. The Kremlin finally admitted the truth and posthumously declared him a hero of the Soviet Union, the nation's highest honor. They celebrated his genius, even as they condemned him to death. He was a flawed man, but his skill as a spy was unparalleled. He was a man so brilliant, so audacious, and so completely dedicated to his cause, that he earned the ultimate, rarest honor in the world of espionage: the profound and enduring respect of the very enemies who executed him. His final words were reportedly a quiet statement in Japanese to his guards: "The Red Army, international communism, the Soviet Union." He remained a true believer to the very end. Sorge's greatest intelligence coup had been ignored, and his country was on the brink of collapse. He refused to break, maintaining his cover as a loyal Nazi. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. When he finally realized the game was up, he confessed, but he did so with a strange pride. He laid out the entire history of his operation, detailing his methods and his successes. He was devastated, but he did not stop working. They had caught a man who had been secretly advising both the German ambassador and the Japanese prime minister, all while working for their sworn enemy. They developed a deep, professional respect for the man who had so thoroughly outwitted them. They claimed to have never heard of him, branding him a traitor who had confessed to save his own skin. Key: they refused all Japanese offers to trade him for prisoners of war. Stalin, who owed the survival of his regime to Sorge, abandoned him completely. His next piece of intelligence would be even more important. For years, Sorge's ring fed a steady stream of high-level intelligence back to Moscow. But his most critical moment came in the spring of 1941. Through his sources in the German embassy, Sorge learned of Hitler's secret plan to invade the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. Sorge was given one last, vital task: find out if Japan will attack. They would not attack the Soviet Union. Sorge immediately radioed the intelligence to Moscow. This time, Stalin listened. Trusting Sorge's report, he made one of the most pivotal decisions of the entire war. Through his agent, Ozaki, Sorge learned the truth. The Japanese High Command had met and made a fateful decision. They believed the war in China was too important, and they were concerned about American naval power. He was, quite literally, helping to shape Nazi policy in Japan. He fought in the trenches, was wounded 3 times, and earned the Iron Cross for his bravery. Over 1 million soldiers, equipped for winter warfare, were moved thousands of miles by train to defend the capital. They arrived just in time to lead the counterattack that pushed the exhausted German army back from the gates of Moscow. And Tatsumi Ozaki, a well-connected Japanese journalist and advisor to the Japanese Prime Minister. Through Ozaki, Sorge gained access to the innermost circles of the Japanese government. He was loud, boisterous, and lived life at full throttle. He rode a motorcycle at dangerous speeds through the streets of Tokyo. This reckless, larger-than-life persona was the ultimate camouflage. No one would suspect a man who drew so much attention to himself of being a clandestine agent. What if they studied his work, marveled at his genius, and, in their own way, celebrated him as the greatest spy master they had ever encountered? He was a communist spy who became a trusted Nazi journalist, a trusted confidant of the German ambassador in Tokyo. He was the man who told Stalin the exact date of Hitler's invasion of Russia, a warning that went ignored. And he was the man who then told Stalin that Japan would not attack, saving Moscow from certain defeat. This is the story of Richard Sorge, the spy who was so good even his enemies had to admire him. Richard Sorge was born in Russia in 1895 to a German mining engineer and a Russian mother, but he grew up in Berlin. But the brutal, senseless slaughter of the war changed him. Lying in a military hospital, recovering from shrapnel wounds that would leave him with a lifelong limp. He read the works of Karl Marx. He became a fervent, dedicated communist. He saw capitalism and nationalism as the twin evils that had led the world to ruin, and he dedicated his life to their destruction. After the war, he earned a PhD in political science and worked as a journalist. But his true calling was espionage. His most important assignment, the one that would define his legacy, came in the 1930s. He arrived in 1933 under the perfect cover, a loyal, enthusiastic German journalist reporting for several influential newspapers back home. He wasn't the quiet, unassuming spy of fiction. He befriended the German ambassador Eugene OTT, becoming his closest friend and unofficial advisor. Sorge built a brilliant spy ring. His 2 most important agents were Max Clausen, a fellow German who served as his radio operator through Ambassador OTT. He had access to the plans of the Axis powers. He obtained the exact date of the planned invasion, June 22nd. He sent multiple urgent warnings to Moscow. But Stalin was blinded by his own paranoia. On June 22, 1941, millions of German soldiers stormed across the Soviet border. As the German army pushed towards the gates of Moscow in the winter of 1941, Stalin's situation was desperate. He needed to know Japan's intentions. The fate of the war hung in the balance. They had decided to strike south, towards Southeast Asia and the Pacific, a move that would inevitably lead to a conflict with the United States. He ordered the Siberian divisions to be transferred from the east to the west. This was the first major defeat for Hitler's army, a turning point in World War II. They had slowly, meticulously begun to close the net. Sorge was interrogated for months. The Japanese interrogators were stunned. They had never encountered a spy of this caliber. They compiled a detailed record of his confession and his techniques, which became required reading for Japanese intelligence officers for years to come. The Soviet Union, in a final act of betrayal, publicly disowned him. On November 7, 1944, Richard Sorge was hanged in a Tokyo prison. For 20 years, his story was buried. The Soviet Union denied his existence. But in 1964, the political climate had changed. Richard Sorge's story is a testament to the profound impact that a single predicated individual can have on the course of history.